I always tell teams, I'm like, consumers are very rarely going to come up with the idea for you. In fact, if they did, then you wouldn't have a job. But they will tell you the tension. They'll tell you the tension, they'll show you the tension. And that's what you're seeing in a lot of the viral content is consumers, and some consumers are really good at this. They're showing you, they're hacking it themselves. They're doing something themselves at home. They're showing you things like, look what I did, this really cool kitchen hack. Well, that's attention. And if you see that tension and you see enough of that tension coming about, then you can say, that's something that we need to solve. In the vernacular of innovation, we usually call it the consumer job to be done. It's a job that people are trying to find a solution for in their life or in their kitchen or whatever, and that it's our job from an innovation perspective to be able to solve that in a new way.
Welcome to another episode of Fresh Take with IDDBA. I'm your host, Kat Shanahan, Vice President of Marketing and Membership, and today we're bringing you a What's in Store episode. We'll be discussing one of the most pressing challenges in the food industry, the vanishing product development cycle. In a world where a single viral video can empty grocery store shelves overnight, the traditional 18-month innovation timeline is quickly becoming a relic of the past. To help us understand how to move at the speed of social media, we are joined by Kevin Ryan, the founder and CEO of Malachite Strategy and Research. Kevin holds a PhD in food science and an MSc in food anthropology, giving him a unique perspective on the intersection of food chemistry and human culture. He's here to discuss his article in the 2026 edition of What's in Store, Innovation at the Speed of TikTok. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Just in case our listeners have not yet picked up their free copy, if they are a member, of What's in Store, give us a little bit of your background. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so as mentioned, my background is almost all food in some way. So, food science background, anthropology background. I started in R&D, worked at General Mills for many years, led innovation and strategy there, helping, with category and brand development, and then moved to Amazon and did similar type of things for Amazon, both from a retail perspective as well as from a category perspective. And then started Malachite, and basically our clients are consumer packaged good companies, retailers, ingredient companies, helping them spot opportunities at the front end of innovation.
I'm curious, what was it that led you to combine food science and food anthropology? Was there something that tripped that, or did you just combine interests?
It's combined interests. I've always been interested in the what behind stuff in general, and I have a passion for food. And so it's a what from both directions, right? It's a what of like, what makes this work? How does a packaged food product work? But it's also a what of why people want it. So understanding what's really driving people to eat the way they do, have a ritual around food the way they do, all of that kind of stuff is just fascinating to me because it really helps understand like why make a product, how to make a product, how to make a product that actually, gets trialed and repeated from a purchase perspective. So that was really the driver, was trying to understand food from all perspectives.
And I love the focus on innovation. I think one thing that stuck out to me in your article was that the traditional 18-month product development cycle is becoming very outdated. And especially in the dairy and bakery sectors, supply chains, shelf lives, they're really complicated. So give us a little insight into how brands realistically bridge the gap between something like a 24-hour viral trend and a 12-month product reality.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think of them basically as two different tracks. It's not so much that most companies cannot just jump in and go and do things at the speed of TikTok. It's really hard for most people. And I think that often becomes the tension, is they feel like they need to do that. They need to be that fast. And it's very few companies that can. Most companies can't turn that quick. Most ships can't turn that fast. But you need to think of it as, what is the viral signal telling me? And being able to be aware at the speed of TikTok and to be able to kind of say, I see this signal, my team sees these signals, it's stress testing our innovation pipeline. And then can we turn it? Can we twist it? Can we impact it at the speed of the viral aspect? So it's not so much it's going to completely upend our 12-month cycle if we see something, floating to the top on TikTok. That would be, and that's typically the problem that happens, right? People
Yeah.
are like, "Oh my gosh, it's feta cheese and pasta. Like, we need to do something." That causes chaos. It's more of the idea that you have an always on listening to these viral aspects and how that then impacts your innovation pipeline.
I think the listening piece also stuck out to me. So I think a lot of
Mhm.
organizations, when they think about listening, they think of what they're actually doing is kind of scrolling and hoping and thinking about that
Yes.
in terms of social listening. So, what does a professional grade strategic listening framework
Mhm.
look like for something like
Yeah.
a mid-sized deli or dairy brand?
Yeah, you raise a really good point. There's a difference between listening and watching, or listening and just scrolling. So listening is uh, purposeful, and it has a structure to it in this sense. So it is about whether or not, depending on the size of your company, and you can be quite scrappy about this, or extremely, embedded with frameworks and tech to do this. But at the heart of it, really what it is having a system of watching what's going on, listening to what's going on, seeing the trends that are popping up within the categories that you're watching, and then tracking it and saying what's behind it. What is behind it? Because as we said, the viral things that go out there. So, there's some crazy things that go out online, because it's fun. However, what you need to do is build, a structure that basically says, okay, right now, meat cereal is on viral. And if you haven't seen that, there's meat cereal is like,
I've
a viral thing.
not. I'm a little
Yeah,
nervous
Meaties.
about that. Okay.
Meaties is a brand that's currently popping. But the thing is that you don't pay attention to that. I mean, you do, but you don't pay attention to the brand so much. You pay attention to what's behind it. I always think of it as kind of the flower versus the soil. So you can pay attention to the flower, which is great, but as we know, unfortunately, flowers, die quickly. They lose the bloom pretty quick. You have to pay attention to the soil. What's growing underneath it? What is causing that flower to grow? And if you understand that, then you can be ready for the next thing. So when you're tracking, when your team is saying, I was looking on TikTok and I saw this, you have to kind of have a method. And this could be a template, it could be beyond a template, it could be workshops and all that kind of stuff, to be able to say, okay, we see that, meat cereal or whatever it is that's out there. That's the flower. What is it? Is it, I want real ingredients? Is it the idea that we want less processed? Is it the idea that we want the convenience that, cereal was providing, but in a real food way? All of that. It's that digging that is important that leads to the real listening aspect of it. And that's what gets impacted towards your innovation framework. Not the idea of like, we've got to go out and make meat cereal. That is not what you should take from that. It should be the underlying structure of what's causing it to pop. That is what impacts your innovation pipeline.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. What do
Hmm.
you think is the why behind meat cereal? I'm hearing about this for the first time. I'm very confused. I'm going to be doing some Googling later.
Yeah,
When you see something like that,
yeah.
what do you feel is driving that? What do you think is in the soil that's producing something like a meat cereal?
Well, it's not the only meat specific thing that's going out there. So there's a company called Equip Foods. They produce snack bars that are like chocolate peanut butter, but made with beef protein.
Mm,
Or there's a chicken broth bar out there as well. It I think it really speaks to a desire for a known protein source
yeah.
versus kind of a lab created. Some consumers think of it as lab created. I get what a meat protein is. I understand it. It's a one ingredient on the ingredient deck. I get meat protein. And then it's that unprocessed aspect of it. I get that part of it. And then I think it is the convenience. I still want the convenience. So it's somewhat of a tension, right? It's the tension of I want real unprocessed, but then I also need convenience, which seem almost opposed to each other. And so it's like, how can we put them together? And what's interesting is the only way we currently can do it, and I say currently on purpose, currently can do it is to put it in formats and forms that make sense to us now, like cereal and bars.
Mm.
I think it'll evolve into how else could we get it in a convenient way, right? How else could you do it? So you see things like, maybe it's meat-based trail mix or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? But that's what I'm talking about is like in taking and digging further into what you seeing popping virally and then digging in and then saying, okay, now we understand what that is. How might we innovate in a different way?
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about it that way because what's going through my head is I like how you narrowed it down to the fact that people want the protein and they know protein and they know meat protein. Okay, well we've got
Mhm.
that covered. Now let's add that to something we know, and then let's
Yes.
let that pave the way to get us to something that we don't know.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's just it, is that I always tell teams, I'm like, consumers are very rarely going to come up with the idea for you. In fact, if they did, then you wouldn't have a job. But but they will tell you the tension. They'll tell you the tension, they'll show you the tension. And that's what you're seeing in a lot of the viral content is consumers, and some consumers are really good at this. They're showing you they're either they're hacking it themselves. They're doing something themselves at home. They're showing you things like, look what I did, this really cool kitchen hack. Well,
Hmm.
that's attention. And if you see that tension and you see enough of that tension coming about, then you can say, that's something that we need to solve. In the vernacular of innovation, we usually call it the consumer job to be done.
Yeah.
It's a job that people are trying to find a solution for in their life or in their kitchen or whatever, and that it's our job from an innovation perspective to be able to solve that in a new way.
That was one of the things that always sticks out to me with innovation. One of the best pieces of advice that I got was to fall in love with the problem, not the
Hmm.
solution. So you're
That's
not
right.
falling in love with the flour, you're not falling in love with the meat cereal, you're falling in love with
Yeah,
how do people get convenient protein.
correct. Yeah, that divorce from the product, to your point, falling in love with the problem, not the product, gets you out of the mindset of, well, we have this equipment and that's
Yeah.
all we can make in order to solve that. And it's like, that's not the best way forward because to a consumer, they don't just want your product, they want a solution. That's really what they want. And they'll go to someone else if they can get it.
They don't care what equipment that you have or what you think you can
No,
make with it.
right.
One of the things you just mentioned was trends and trying to get ahead of some of the trends and using social listening for that. And something that you've talked about is microclusters. That was in your
Hmm.
article for the What's in Store publication. That
Yeah.
to me felt really tangible. So, can you share some information on what you mean with those microclusters and how you use that to anticipate trends?
Yeah. Another way to talk about them is kind of extreme users. I think about it as small groups of people, very loud groups of people. And sometimes you'll hear them called super consumers as well, people who are very active. A good example of this is years ago. I remember doing projects where I was looking at like energy for snacking, and we went and talked to people who were ultra marathoners. Those are great group of people because those are people who have an extreme need. They're very vocal because they need it, and oftentimes they are hacking it themselves. They were the first ones to make goo, if you're familiar with that. Basically a very high sugar, high carbohydrate substance that they can eat while running. So it's like
Mm.
not only the product, but also the way in which it's packaged, the way in which it's delivered. Those are what you're looking at. And now instead of just going and talking to them, you have a channel, you have TikTok, you have Reels, you have whatever, where they can go out and they can actually show you, this is what I want, this is what I've done, look at what I'm doing. And then everyone else kind of jumps in and adds their own thought. As an innovation team, you should be looking at those and saying, are we solving for that need? Because yes, they're an extreme group, but I bet even parts of mainstream need that as well.
I like how you're talking about aligning this with your consumers. I think one of the stories I was always told in my marketing trajectory, and I think this is actually not correctly attributed, but when Henry Ford said if he asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses
Yeah,
instead of the automobile. And so when you're
right.
thinking about consumer groups, what are you thinking about in terms of finding the right consumer group and either introducing something new like an automobile or trying to help them with faster horses?
Yeah. The availability of social media has allowed us to see behind the curtain that before cost a lot of money to go in home, recruit these folks that are extreme users or that have this tension and that get in there with them. So there's that beauty of social media that allows you to do that. So when you're looking for your your group, to be able to see those tensions. I always kind of go out in different um, vectors. So what I mean by that is if I'm studying, let's say, morning breakfast, um, I think about who my consumer would be, who my target would be. Is it millennial families or something like that,
Hmm.
with kids? And then if you can go deeper from a demographic perspective, great. But even not, then I say, okay, well then who's going to within there, who's going to have the most to say about breakfast? Is it following soccer moms on social media because they're going to have to deal with, I got to get my kids to soccer on an early Saturday morning. I got to be able to figure out how to get breakfast to them in a convenient manner that has the nutritional requirements that I think is necessary. Because you can see there that that person would have a very keen interest in getting a solution that works best for them. They will show you the tension. They will show it, and they will probably show you a solution that they have come up with.
Hmm.
Again, not something that you're going to need to do, but you can reverse engineer it and say, oh, what is the driving tension there that I need to kind of think about and add to my innovation pipeline?
I want to pause just for a second. You have mentioned a few times innovation team. So I'm
Hmm.
curious in your head when you're talking about the social listening,
Yeah,
who at organizations, and you can kind of think maybe smaller or mid-sized
yeah.
organizations, who are the people that are doing it? What does that team look like?
Yeah. I mean, in a big organization, of course, you can have a dedicated innovation team, and that's becoming more and more rare. There's either a centralized group, or within a brand team, you can have a few folks that part of their job is from an innovation perspective. And by innovation, I mean usually new product packaging experiences that generate profit, right?
Mm.
But there's also renovation, which is just dealing with your core deliverable in a unique way. I think for most companies, and especially medium to small companies, it is kind of everyone's job to do innovation and renovation. So I think you need a framework of, to be able to get everyone involved. That not being, able for everyone to do there, it should be a small group of maybe marketing lead, R&D lead, and if you have like a consumer insight breakaway from a marketing side, you can also include them. That is part of their job to do this, to think about this, to lead these type of things, to do these type of viral collection. The collection part, watching online, collecting these type of things, coming to maybe a monthly workshop or something like that, or putting your weekly thoughts that you saw on viral aspects of it onto a SharePoint. That could be most of your team. It's the who's leading it part that could be more dedicated to more of a select group. But again, it doesn't have to be a very formalized, oh, this is just the innovation team and that's all they do. It could be a subset of your normal working group.
And we can talk about tools in just a minute because you do reference
Hmm.
some tools and things in the article.
Hmm.
But one thing
Yeah.
I have heard you talk a lot about is the human side of it. You're
All right.
referring to people doing this, people scrolling, people looking. I haven't heard you talk too much about AI or any sort of aggregate tools that are spitting out
Mhm.
information. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about the human versus software component of the process.
To me, the software component of it just can help you, get the signal for the noise. It can whittle it down a little bit so that you're not, spending your entire time scrolling social media, which as fun as that could be, or as, mind-numbing
Depressing.
that could be, whichever it could be. It could, both ways. It can get you so that you can look. I mean, in my mind and in my experience, the best use of these AI tools is to help narrow it down so that a human can actually, get a amount that says this is worth my time to look at, this is worth my
Mm.
time to invest in, versus just go and look at this and do the sorting for me, do the analysis for me. That worries me on a few levels. One is I don't know if I trust it yet to be able to get to that point. And number two, a um, there's a lot of benefit to the actual review and analysis by a human. There's an empathy building.
Mm.
And there's that process of reading the components from a consumer's perspective allows you that when you're in subsequent meetings to be able to get, oh, wait a minute, I saw this, or I've heard this, or I've felt this. Because at the end of the day, innovation is a cultural thing, not a template thing, not a process thing. It is a cultural thing. And by that, I mean cultural in the company. Um, and I've it's not an idea thing either. And this is the thing that I oftentimes get from companies is that one of the things they always say is, we need more ideas. And I'm like, you do not need
Yeah.
more ideas. You need to be able to focus your innovation. You need to focus on what ideas need to go out there and need to get improved. And that focus doesn't usually come through an AI saying you need to do this alone. The
Hmm.
data, definitely, the numbers can help because you can say, oh, this is rising, this is falling. But even that, it's that person in the boardroom or in the meeting room that basically makes a strong case for, I think we really need to be doing X. Why? Because I saw this, I heard this, and we have the numbers, right? It's that combination. And that only comes through reading it or talking to consumers or watching the videos, all that kind of stuff. So you still need to do, that combination of what I call heart and head, right? It's the
Hmm.
head part is the numbers, and the AI can give you that, but it's the heart part that you get by talking and listening to consumers. Unless you have that external group that you've seen enough, talked to enough, read about enough, all that kind of stuff that you can say, I put enough points together to draw a line to be able to say, I think they really want it. And again, as I said, being able to do that allows you then to have the intestinal fortitude, right? To be able to go into a meeting and go, no, I don't think we should stop. I think we should continue, right? That is powerful. And that only happens through some consumer empathy building.
Hmm. We'll talk about some tools to use in just a second, but one of the things you talk about in the article is social proto validations, doing some
Hmm.
mock-ups and doing some
Yeah.
renders. So, tell us a little bit about what this entails and how a brand can use these types of digital tests to
Yeah.
either augment or maybe even replace traditional focus groups.
Yeah, so you're seeing this a lot more about working with social media agencies or groups to be able to mock up. And by mock up, I mean doing something that actually shows the potential solution to the problem that you heard from consumers in a visual way for them. So, it's making up a version, and it's getting easier to do this, right? Through AI tools and all that kind of stuff. You can mock up a version of like, here's what a late night, salami crackers kind of, that kind of thing would look like. And here's our
Yeah.
new version of spin on that. Here's what it could look like. And then only sending it or allowing it through a particular regional or even, like an A/B test within a particular segment of the population that you're aiming at. Those tools exist. You can have that access to that. And it's seeing how much you're getting, not likes, it's more about engagement at that point. Comments, engagements, all that kind of stuff. I would caution though, virality does not equal velocity
Mm.
with some of these things. You have to really, it's more about the learning than it is about, oh my gosh, we got 10,000 likes, ship it. That's not what it is. It's often about learning, and it's about the prototyping, about the idea of, we showed them this, charcuterie set. And what we heard was, that it's really about having, three components is the right amount, four components is too many. And so it's like that's an interesting design principle to be able to take apart. Or it's really about, a lot of people asked about what the percentage, the grams of protein were. So it's very important for us to have the grams of protein on the outside. Those are all very obvious, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The idea being is that you're learning through those type of prototyping virtually versus it's not about let's get this ready to ship based on this exactly. That can come later. It needs a little bit more rigor, and I would say a little bit more compliance and regulatory type of stuff. So I'd caution people on that. But it is about learning. How can you learn faster with real consumer feedback versus spending a lot spending a lot of time not knowing, right?
Hmm.
Talking to yourselves, talking to the echo chamber that becomes your group, you start to kind of go, yeah, I think I love this type of charcuterie. I wouldn't everyone, and then you just start building it and then forget about the consumer. Using these more quick and dirty type of social listening tools allows you more prototyping a lot faster.
So for the types of social listening that we have talked to this
hmm
today, is
hmm
this early stage product development, mid stage? It doesn't sound like it's late stage. Where does
It's
it
not
fit?
late stage. It's early stage, I would say. It's before you get to it's early on when you're still have your innovation pipeline. You're still pressure testing it. You're Probably it's before, like, it depends on how your stage gate is or whether or not you use like
Hmm.
an agile stage gate combination. It's early days there where you're trying to set up what our pipeline might be, but it could also be right before you're getting into actual physical content. You're getting into stuff. You're getting into a lot of the physical stuff. That it all fits into there where it's still that sense of we know the domain space that we're in. We know the consumer group that we're probably talking to from a demographic or psychographic point of view. We get all that. What we're trying now to figure out is what does that solve and what are we solving for, so to speak. It's right in that space, which is a really critical space because if you lock in incorrectly there, you can go down a road that can be very expensive and it's hard to back out of for many folks.
Hmm.
It shouldn't be though, because this idea of social listening should allow you to help have more pivots during that.
I love how you talk about it in terms of I've been in those rooms where we're talking about something new and they're like, "Oh, yeah, let's do this because
Yeah.
I love this or so and so loves this." And
Mhm.
so I really resonate with what you're saying in terms of getting it out of that room and finding the people who care about it or who we want to care about it and see if it's resonating with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Oh, it's very almost intoxicating to be in those rooms because you're hyping yourself up, and which is exactly how things get out of those rooms is to hype yourself up. So I'm not
Mhm.
negating it. The problem is that sometimes that hype though leads to going down the wrong path that, like I said, is very difficult to pivot from because you basically all sold yourself a story that is sounds really good and you fall in love with it, and you're not listening to the consumer. So the more you can inject the consumer into this, the better. And here I would definitely again mention is that it's not just listening to the top influencer within this,
Mhm.
because they're also trying to sell something. We get enamored with oh, this influencer has 1.5 million followers on TikTok. I mean, that's great because what that shows you, it shows you heat, in a heat map, it shows you that heat. I'm less enamored with them because again, like I said, I know they're a brand and they're probably, getting some, pay for play kind of stuff, which is
Mhm.
the way we work now. I'm more interested in the people that chime in underneath and say, "Oh, I agree or I disagree or I'm doing this or I'm doing that." That's what's really interesting, and that's what spending time. That's the difference between what we started off the conversation. We're talking about scrolling or watching versus listening. Listening is digging in and understanding because that listening to the under comments helps you build the sense of what is that soil really involved and what are people who are actually living this actually talking about.
Mhm. From our conversation, I'm gathering there is a place for social listening during most phases of the product
hmm
development cycle. And one thing that we hit on in the article is about, lab trials or things that are toward end stage. Can
Yeah.
you share how a brand might pivot in a very meaningful way, kind of midstream, if a flavor combination cools off, or all the signs had maybe pointed to this being a really good direction with social listening, and now you're
Yeah.
getting the feeling that we really need to make a pivot.
Yeah. I mean, as you launch, as you go in, watching how your brand or adjacencies to your brand are talking is key because again, it's about keeping the finger on the pulse to understand what it is. The idea of pivoting, it depends on where you are in the process. If you're doing a regional launch or something like that, then yeah, you should be watching how people are talking about it so that you can be open to the idea of, okay, we're getting enough. feedback here and having some sort of, team decided on what are we looking for. And then the other thing I would say is to balancing the social listening with other, if you can afford it, other listening aspects. By that I mean talking to real people, taking conversations at local, retailers or something like that. It should be that balance to understand, are we listening to the microcosm, or are we listening to mainstream, and trying to find the two of those.
I like that it's part of the process. It's not,
Hmm.
there's no magic bullet. It's all how these pieces work together.
Yeah. The other thing you have to understand too is that social media oftentimes, and this is the anthropology part of it, it it is people showing their ideal selves to you and to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So always having that in the back of your mind is that there is some performance sometimes to this, which is
Absolutely.
why having all of those under conversations and trying to triangulate with those is helpful because you can kind of hear the tensions in there underneath. So listening to that, the most loud person, you have to remember the performative aspect too.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the tools that organizations can use for social listening?
Yeah, there are AI companies out there, and I'm not gonna give all the names. I'd have to actually look up some of the names because they change all the time because we live in that world of AI type of stuff. But there are companies out there that will help you package up, and put out like a prototype type of thing, for social media. And by that I mean like, something that you can put in the TikTok shop. You can work directly with the TikTok folks to be able to do that. And from a regional perspective, they will put, like basically some aspects of a prototype things for a TikTok shop. So there's that for more of a prototyping. For prior to that, as you get into more listening, there are a wealth of programs out there that will do the sorting for you. Try to find, like who's your demographic and be able to say, oh, this is the person. Or they'll be able to say, these are the number of people that are speaking about breakfast. Can we go there? So, I think of people like Slate or Spate. I'm sorry, Spate for some aspects of food and retail. Mintel's got aspects of this as well. All of them do similar type of things, which is they help you kind of triangulate and know where to look. So they're saying, oh, these people are talking about cottage cheese, and that they can show you the connections between them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the back end of it, a lot of it is the same stuff that you were seeing on Google. It's like, to get nerdy, it's the Boolean logic and all this kind of stuff of like this plus this plus this is what they're
Yeah.
kind of searching for so that you can kind of see it. It allows you to kind of go in and kind of look. And then even more complicated ones will put up a dashboard for you.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones I just mentioned, they'll develop a dashboard to say, well, today, again, cottage cheese is up, and now cottage cheese is connected to, pancakes today, more than it was yesterday. So something's popping, and here's why it's popping. So it depends on how much, well, money, but also depends on how much time you want to spend doing that digging versus having the software dig for you so that you
Mm-hmm.
can look. So like Creative Center, if you've ever heard of like that.
What is one thing somebody could do tomorrow to get started if this has not been part of their practice? They like what you've said. What's one thing they
Yeah.
can do tomorrow?
Yeah. If you're not on these, if you've only been like a follower, a lurker, as people would say on social media, if you've only been a lurker, I would, number one, sign up for these social, even if you have to do like a burner type of thing. Some people don't want these things on their, but sign up for the categories and the adjacent categories. That's important because it's say, for example, if that you're a dairy company, right, and you make milk and cheese, okay, follow what people are saying within milk, right, or within cheese, but then also look at, well, like how people are using milk or cheese, right? So it's like looking at ice cream, and you're like, well, I don't do anything with ice cream. It's like, no, no, look at ice cream, and then look at other things that people are also drinking in those occasions. So we used to always call it share of stomach. What else do you share your stomach with? And it's like, well, people that drink milk may also be drinking orange juice because it's kind of a breakfast thing for some people. And it's like, well, what's going on in orange juice right now? So I would start doing those type of share of stomach connections around your product. So again, I talk about it as concentric circles. It's like, this is what you do. What's the next level out? What's the next level out? What's the next level out? So I would start subscribing to those and watching those and building your own template of what do I think is going on here? It's not just what's popping, cottage cheese pancakes. That's yesterday. Why cottage cheese pancakes? Why is that there? What is going on? And then what's going on in adjacent areas that also make sense? And are we seeing connections between that and what we're doing? And what could we do? So it starts to really kind of bring up some really interesting ideas.
Mm-hmm. Any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners?
I mean, have fun with it. It is fun. Don't get too, like I said, there is what I call TikTok FOMO, which can make you believe that things are happening faster than they are, or that this is if you don't jump in now, it's going to destroy your business. You need to take a little bit of a step back and separate the viral aspect of it from the underlying things. You'll catch in. It's not just you're going to miss this one probably, this thing that's popping now, but you're going to be able to catch the next one because you're going to be prepared because you saw the connection. So that's the thing I would be cautioning against. It's more about the signals and less about the viral aspect of it.
That is great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to hear more from Kevin, feel free to check out his article, Innovation at the Speed of TikTok, in the 2026 edition of What's in Store. It was a pleasure to have you on the show, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, Fresh Take with IDDBA drops 2 episodes a month on the first and third Tuesdays. Our next episode will feature IDDBA show advice from a 30-year show veteran. To ensure you don't miss that, hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for tuning in to Fresh Take with IDDBA.